Thank you. You are a great group.
Oh, thank you.
You're an attractive group. You're pretty smart. If you're athletic, you're pretty athletic. But there are people more attractive than us, more smarter than us, more athletic than us. But nobody can be us as good as we can be ourselves. And really, I think we are all God's masterpiece. And you look the way you do, you have the body style the way you have the intellect you have the disposition and character you have because God gave you that. You don't have to feel competitive with anyone. You are the equal of anybody you will ever meet. Maybe not in intelligence, maybe not in athletic ability, but you are you because God selected everything about you to be the way you are. So you measure up. You don't have to take second place to anybody. I want to talk about evolution. The thing about evolution is it pretty much denies God and it pretty much destroys faith. And there are some reasons for that. The reason you and I believe evolution is that's what we were taught by our authority figures, by our teachers, our instructors, our professors. And so we had no reason to distrust them. They had no reason to deceive us because they were telling what they had been taught by their professors, their authority figures, and the people who taught them were taught that by their authority figures all the way back up to the research scientist. And unless you are a research scientist, you believe evolution on faith. Think about it. Now, there's a couple of perceptions of the theory of evolution. One, and this is a real thing, it rules. It is the authority in science, in education, pretty much in government, in media, in the entertainment side of media, and in the news side of media, and in culture. It rules. The problem is it rules out God. The other perception of the theory of evolution, I want you to, this is the important one. The theory of evolution is only and no more than an alternate explanation of things that finds no room for God. Now, if you're like me, you wonder whether to believe it. And you, like me, we kind of know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. And we wonder if we knew what that college professor knows, we might agree with him. We might think just like him. We might say, you're right, no God, let's get on with it. Well, I hope in the next few minutes we can give you a basis for not ever feeling that. The problem is the theory of evolution sounds like good news at first. Nobody keeping score. Nobody even making rules. So when temptation comes, and temptation comes to all of us, when it comes, you have one less reason to resist temptation. Nobody keeping score. So when somebody is tempted to take advantage of you, whether it's a small thing or a big thing like maybe taking your life, it's a good thing for God to be there in their thinking because it's an additional reason to resist the temptation. In your mind's eye, think of every school day of the school year. Tens of millions of children from 6 years old up are going in to learn, to be trained, to be conditioned, to be brainwashed, to be what? Because only the theory of evolution, the theory of evolution is the only explanation of origins that is taught in the schools. Not only that, they stigmatize you and intimidate you, and if you don't go along with the theory of evolution, you are an outcast, you are viewed as poorly educated, maybe even a Bible thumper, one of those. So it's important that you and I learn to answer these questions that are raised by the theory of evolution. The people you're ministering to have pretty much bought into the idea that God is a pre-scientific concept. They pretty much bought into the idea that, religions really have their origins in antiquity. Well, that's a kind of a loaded statement, because that's like saying if it's not modern, we need to question it. The Oxford English Dictionary is probably the most authoritative reference book in the English language, maybe in any language. The Oxford English Dictionary limits science to the natural and physical world. Well, that makes sense, because if you can't see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, feel it, if you can't measure it, if you can't weigh it, if you can't calibrate it, how do you even know it's there? So that part's valid, but they want to slide into the position that if we can't see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, smell it, it's not real. And that's a big step, because this room is filled with things that you and I can't perceive tangibly. Cell phone waves, radio waves, TV waves, lines of magnetic force pointing to the North Pole. You can't discern those with your unaided natural senses. Science comes back and they say, well, we have instruments that we can detect them with. So we maintain that anything that's not detectable by the five senses with instrumentation doesn't exist and is not real. Is that true? Are you thinking right now? Are your thoughts real? Do you have people that you love? Is love real? There are concepts of justice and fairness and mercy and kindness. These are not tangible, they are real. The theory of evolution goes on the premise, on the foundation, that if it's not physical and natural, we're ruling it out. So there's no place for God in there from the beginning. If there is no God, the initial feeling of liberation, of, hey, I'm free, nobody keeping score, nobody making rules, blots out the rest of it. If there is no God, if you are an accident of nature, you don't have the same amount of value as if you're made in the image of God. You don't have much in the way of significance. You don't have much in the way of meaning. You don't have much in the way of purpose. And when trouble comes, you don't have any hope. There's nobody to hope in. It's you, and you're there by yourself. So there's a lot at stake in whether or not the theory of evolution can be trusted and needs to be authoritative in our life. The evolutionists want to say that evolution is science and science is evolution. And if you resist evolution, you're resisting science. And this works with a lot of people. They shut down because, again, it's kind of good news that there's nobody keeping score. So I kind of like it. So the theory of evolution gets away with assertions, wistful thinking, and speculations, and it's not valid. They don't have a right to do that. Let's talk about truth claims. If I say there is no God, or if I say there is a God, that's a truth claim. How can we measure it? How can we check it for validity? Let's bring it down to something normal and natural. Let's say someone says there's a Rolls Royce outside in the parking lot. That's the truth claim. Now that either corresponds to reality or it doesn't. So someone goes out and comes back in and they say, yeah, there's a Rolls Royce in the parking lot. It meets the test of correspondence. But we say, well, maybe he doesn't know what a Rolls Royce looks like. We don't really know it's there. So everybody in the building goes out and everybody says there's a Rolls Royce there. That coheres. That's a broad answer from a broad variety of sources. And so it meets the truth test. When evolution says we can explain everything apart from God and it's scientific, and if you don't believe it, then we're going to keep you on the outside. You can't be a part of the group unless you go along with it. There was a program, some of you may have seen on PBS, called Cosmos. Anybody remember the guy that did it? Carl Sagan? He opened with a trademark statement every show. He said, the universe, all that is or ever was or ever will be. That's a categorical statement that has no room for God. So, but the world believes it. As believers in God, we don't believe it, but we are considered unscientific or against science because we don't go along with it. Now, you don't need a man in a white coat to tell you what's true to a very large extent. We can go out and look at the world of nature and by observation see it has a high degree of order and organization. Don't need the man in the white coat. Well, that corresponds, the order and the organization corresponds with a mind, an intelligence, a creator God. It doesn't correspond very well to a big explosion in space. If you look further to that order and organization, we find fruitfulness and productivity corresponding as a truth claim with a mind, a creator, a God, not corresponding very well to a big explosion in space. So they're asking us to believe a lot, and there's a lot at stake. Now, we can go a step further. If we look, there is an enormous diversity of things that exist, living things, non-living things, sentient things that are aware of their existence, and plants and trees and things like that. So there is order, organization, fruitfulness, productiveness, diversity, and complexity, a mind-boggling complexity, corresponding with the truth claim that is of God, of an intellect, of intelligence. Now, in addition to these things, there seems to be laws of nature so that there is a predictability. We can kind of know this, that, and the other. And we know that if you plant the seeds at the right time of year, give them the moisture, and they have the sunlight and the care, it's predictable, it's understandable. Understandable is the last thing. It's amazing to me that all of these things are intelligible and understandable and comprehensible. Some of you may have read or heard of Benjamin Franklin flying the kite and the lightning struck the key, and this proved that lightning was electricity. If Ben Franklin could walk through any of our homes today, he would be tempted to describe many things as miraculous. And in a sense it is, but they all conform to the laws of physics, and they are predictable, understandable, and dependable. All of modern technology, all of the things that you and I enjoy, are the unlocking of the laws of physics. And if you build a refrigerator this way, it will work. If you build an automobile this way, it will work. Predictable and understandable, which corresponds not to a big explosion in space, to a mind, to an intellect, to a creator God. Now, you and I, at times, we're up, at times we're down. When we're down, it's a time of spiritual warfare, and the enemy wants to sit on your shoulder and say, you know, you're really not much, and you know, you're a failure, and you know, you don't have any meaning and purpose, so why don't you just take your own life? And so we don't take it that far, but we do struggle sometimes with whether we have any meaning or value. We can put that one to rest forever. The hard disciplines, the science of ecology and environmentalism, says that everything has a purpose. Everything fits in. If you don't have a purpose, which is the conclusion from the theory of evolution, then neither does anything else. But the testimony of ecology and environmentalism says that everything has a purpose, and so do you. Let's talk about the origin of the theory of evolution. It goes back to the time of Darwin, 150, 175, 200 years ago, whatever it was. Before that, God was an absolutely adequate explanation, a scientific explanation of everything that existed, and people were satisfied with that. But other people came along and said, you know, this God thing has a moral component, and it seems like God wants to keep us from all the things that we really enjoy doing. So let's look and see if we can find another explanation that leaves God out. Well, if you think about the nature and the character of anybody who would be running from God, that tells you something right there about who they are. And I don't know about you, but I don't want anybody to hold my credit card if they don't believe in God, or my checkbook, or anything. I don't even want to vote for somebody that doesn't believe in God if I have a choice, because God makes the difference between whether you have an unmoving standard of right and wrong, or whether you make the rules for yourself. Now, if you make the rules for yourself, it makes sense for me to say, you live any way you want to, but don't tell me how to live. I'll make up my own mind. Because without God, there's no unmoving standard. It's every man for himself. So it makes sense. Evolution's only reason for existing is to get rid of God. There is no other reason that I can find why evolution would be useful. And again, the theory of evolution is just an explanation that leaves God out of the picture. They leave God out in the beginning, and we think they come to that conclusion in the end. If you and I could look over the shoulder of a scientist, say shortly after Darwin published the theory of evolution, and it really stood the world on its head for a while. And we picture the basic scientists going back into their labs and re-examining reams of data. And they're going to make hundreds and thousands of decisions in each field, from, say, botany and biology and chemistry and physics, all the way to zoology and all of the disciplines in between. Go with me in your mind's eye into one of these laboratories, and we're watching a science. He's looking at a process and an outcome, and he's trying to decide, do I ascribe this to the theory of evolution, or do I ascribe it to God? And maybe he'll take a long time, but he will come to a conclusion. And not only on this decision, but on decisions across the disciplines from one end to the other, it's found in favor of evolution and not against God. So let's say you and I have the opportunity to engage the science and say, we've been watching over your shoulder. We want you to make the decision. You gave it to evolution and not to God. May we ask why you gave it to evolution, not to God? Well, he probably scratches his chin, he ponders, and in a while he says, it just seemed like the right decision. And we say, well, thank you, but that doesn't help us. Would you tell us why it seemed like the right decision? And he said, well, based on what I know, it seemed like the right decision. So we say, do you mean you don't have a standard by which to justify why you don't assign it to God and why you do assign it to evolution? Silence. Silence then, silence now. There are probably tens of thousands of volumes in the university libraries and libraries across the world that purport to prove that evolution is settled science. The reason they can't do that is because they eliminate God before they start, and they assume there's no God and take it from there. If they had a standard by which to justify assigning it to evolution and not to God, it seems like that would be in the science courses from the lowest levels to the intermediate levels to the highest levels. There would be a standard. I can justify assigning it to evolution. I can justify not assigning it to God by this standard. What standard? I don't think they have one. I don't think there is one. I think this explains why they rule by coercion, by intimidation, by censoring other viewpoints, by ridicule. When the science of, let me put it this way, when scientists who were Christians a generation ago began to make a noise and say, we believe that we can have creation science, the other side just put them down. Oh, you want to teach religion in school. So later on, here comes the theory of intelligent design. We think that intelligent design explains these things better than a big, oh, you're wanting to teach religion in school. That's religion. Get it out of here. After that, they came up with complexity, specified complexity. And after that, irreducible complexity. An example of irreducible complexity is a mousetrap. The mousetrap has a foundation, has a spring, a hammer, a bait hook, And if you reduce it by any one of those things, it's no longer a mousetrap. There's a reducible, irreducible simplicity. If you go beyond that, it doesn't function. So they pushed these aside. They had to push them aside because they don't have the justifying standard by which to say, we'll attribute this to the theory of evolution, not to God. If they had the standard, you would know it. It would be in every course syllabus. It would be on every exam. We would know it. We don't have it. Now, if I'm right about this, and if this is the true explanation, then they have said to us, the Garden of Eden is a myth and a fable. And if they don't have a justifying standard, it's them that's believing in the myth and the fable. We could talk a great deal longer on each of these points and other points. That's all I have to say, but if you have a question, now I need to give you a warning. I love questions. I'm great at questions, but I don't have all the answers. But I'll give it a try. If you have anything you want to ask, I'll see if I can clarify or expand. Yes?
Do you think,
Speak louder, please.
Do you think evolution and Christianity can overlap, or are they mutually exclusive?
Well, there are people that want to talk about theistic evolution, and I don't think I have to take a hard line on that, other than the Bible is pretty clear that death reigned from Adam to the time of the law of Moses. So long periods of time don't fit the history. I don't deal in science because the only answer we've had so far are scientific answers, and it's like saying my science provides a better answer than your science, and they control all the microphones and all the media and everything, so we don't get to make our case. I don't think you have to allow for evolution. I don't think there's any reason for it other than getting rid of God, and I don't think they have a justifying basis by which to ascribe to evolution and not to God.